Let's go to Magdalene Rose, our political affairs and campaign affairs correspondent, who will give us the young person's take on all this. And maybe there may be some hubbub and some buzz about Trump's unforced errors and announcements on IVF. And as Don said, maybe this is just, I don't like you, DeSantis, and you don't run the state I do with the support of Proposition 4 in Florida. Magdalene, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Yes. You heard all that. So,
Yes.
young conservative, young liberals' response to all that's going on today. First of all, young conservatives, any concern there about they're probably all for this IVF tax break stuff.
They're not. And this is a really big misconception. There are young conservatives who are. But young Catholics are disgusted. They don't want this. They think it's ridiculous. And they don't understand where this came from. And I will just say this. Several years ago, I warned about Tulsi Gabbard's influence within the conservative world. And people said, oh, no, she's fine. What could go wrong? Literally like 24 hours or 72 hours after her involvement, suddenly Trump is supporting government-mandated funding for IVF and voting against pro-life measures in his home state. So I think a lot of this, as do other people near him, believe that this is because of Tulsi Gabbard's influence. She has convinced him that this is what women want. And I will tell you, young Christians and conservatives are disgusted by what he's doing right now.
You know, that's okay. I didn't. Okay, is it Tulsi Gabbard that is putting this idea in his head? Now, this to me is, because I know about this, because I actually looked it up and I studied it. Trump has no Catholic, philosophical, formative catechesis formation that I can pick up on whatsoever. He may know a little Marcus Aurelius when it comes to war. He may know a little bit of Aristotle when it comes to some business ethics. He did go to Wharton, after all. So he may know a little bit about that, but outside of that, his moral formation, he has none. Tulsi Gabbard can't say that. Her dad is the most ardently pro-life, anti-homo marriage Catholic on the island of Hawaii. Did you know that?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I did. I've seen the commercials he was in talking about traditional marriage. And it's not that it's not Trump's fault for going with these policies. But I will tell you, there has been a feeling amongst young conservatives that Trump is looking for, like, the answer on how to win over women. And I don't think it's a coincidence that she pretty much joins his campaign, comes aboard, endorses him, her influence spreads, and all of a sudden he's saying 6 weeks isn't enough for an abortion ban. He's saying that it's too severe. I think you're right. I think a lot of this is to sort of be like, I'm still in charge, DeSantis. But the other side of this is we now have a significant amount of libertarians influencing his political policy.
That's a good point.
Which is okay. Which is okay in some regards. I think maybe in war and we don't have to be involved in every conflict. But this is the Republican Party. This is not the Libertarian Party. So I don't like this idea that we're the bad, sort of old-fashioned Republicans for caring about life issues.
I want to read a comment from a friend here. And it says, Mike, we all know that Trump is a flawed man. I personally refuse to condone any of the lies or evil from Trump or anyone else. I call him out on it. Not doing so helps no one. I'm not saying I can or won't vote for him, but up till that moment, my position is to sway his. Good point. He works for us and not in reverse. Now, this is something I hadn't thought of, Jonathan, so good point. It's pretty sad his morals are being imposed on his supporters as if he owns us. As such, It's important we speak out on both good and bad issues so he feels the heat and push back on bad issues. I think that he should get an earful, and I hope that he does, from J.D. Vance, who may pull him on the same time, Mr. President. I just have to tell you, I think that this is I don't think that you should wade into this water here. I think that you run the risk of alienating people that I know that are supporters of yours, that are in the pro-life Catholic base. Some of them are influencers, and they have big platforms and big megaphones. And I don't think they're not going to oppose you. Some of them will, but they're not going to promote you either. There's a downside risk to this that the guy that wrote The Art of the Deal, and there's a whole chapter in The Art of the Deal book, I can tell you, I committed some of it to memory, that says if you protect the downside, the upside will take care of itself. In these moves, especially the one against DeSantis in Florida, that's not protecting the downside. He's giving in to the downside. I agree with Eric Sammons. This is, to me, and I think Eric was right. I think he nailed this. Great commentary, Eric. I think that Eric Sammons, when he said this is not the masculine alpha male Trump making the statements. This is, now that you said Tulsi Gabbard, because Maggie keeps going, there's no way that Melania knows this. There's no way Melania is signing off on this. No way. No way.
Nope.
So
no
then what woman has entered his sphere? Magdalene, there were two. Nicole Shanahan and Tulsi Gabbard. Both pro-choice. Both very libertarian in their morals, which means they don't have any, or they don't express them. So yeah, you would be getting a double whammy. It's okay to join us on abortion and all the other social moral issues. And there are women that are going to follow you. You'll be their hero. So yeah, I think that your analysis there that it was Tulsi, spot on.
And you know what it is? They're a very dangerous type of pro-life woman. They're not like they're not the blue-haired feminists. They're not the people who are like unsavable. They're those suave pro-choice people. They're the people who say, well, it's a necessary evil. It's necessary to do this. They've gotten in his head. They have twisted his ideas and his policies so much so that in the state of Florida, a state he's going to win, you and I both know he's going to win the state of Florida overwhelmingly, he's now decided it's worth it to signal that he's going to the left on abortion. Melania would never have pushed this. I mean, one of the very good things about Melania Trump is that we know that when he has a policy, it didn't come from Melania. We never question whether or not she's pushing too much influence like in a Hillary Clinton model. So the only women who entered his realm recently were libertarians. I don't think he understands what this will cost him. And it's so ridiculous to dismiss people like, for example, like Allie Beth Stuckley, massive Christian right-wing woman in this world. She's dismissing everything she would push in favor of this libertarian thing. But at the end of the day, she could get Christian moms out to vote. Nicole Shanahan cannot.
Yeah, I think, but Melania is not to be found.
No,
she
didn't do any of this.
No, she's nowhere to be found other than him mentioning her. All right, let's talk quickly, and we got 3 minutes left, with Magdalene Rose, our digital media strategist and our campaign affairs correspondent here on the Crusade Radio Network. Let's quickly. Did Kamala Harris do herself and Tim Walz any favors last night by going on CNN?
No, and it's a peculiar interview. I mean, when you watch it, you realize, A, they have no chemistry. I mean, I don't know who tested them or screen tested them before she announced them, because this is a disaster. But the other side of that is he looks more stately than she does. I would think that he's the presidential candidate and she's the vice presidential candidate. And you know why that is? Because she is the vice presidential candidate. She didn't go through the process where you become presidential in running for the office.
There you go.
The way literally everyone else has, pretty much in American history, who's been in her position. He looks presidential, and she looks vice presidential.
Well, the only example that we have of someone looking vice presidential and being tested as a presidential candidate in the modern era is Gerald R. Ford, and he lost.
Yeah.
There's your modern example. There's a guy that got here. Gerald R. Ford in 1972 and 1973 got this many votes in a primary.
0.0.
None. He was a member of the House of Representatives. His claim to fame was he was on the Warren Commission. The powers that be and the CIA and the deep state had to get rid of Spiro T. Agnew because he was presidential. So they got rid of him. They set him up on tax evasion. They made him quit. That leaves a vacancy. And then Nixon, then the 24th Amendment comes into play, or the 25th Amendment. And the House chooses, and we now know that this was a setup, Senate, chooses Gerald Ford. Ford gets in there as vice president, never vetted, never ran for president, never had to look presidential, never had to campaign as a presidential candidate. But then he's like, whoa, yeah, I guess I should be all in, because it was just assumed that Nixon would serve out his term and Agnew would be the guy that they would go to. Or maybe it would have been someone of the Goldwater camp. But because it wasn't, and it was Ford, the only evidence that we have of this example happening in the modern era is that Ford got his lunch eaten by the feckless peanut farmer from Georgia, James Earl Carter. So there is a story to be told here, and it doesn't bode well for Harris.
No, it doesn't bode well for Harris. And now we have Donald Trump giving away conservative votes and Christian votes. And I will say this. I talked about the danger of Tulsi Gabbard, I believe in 2019, because people didn't understand that she was sort of starting to eclipse conservative women in reaching out and activism.
Right.
And now today you and I are discussing whether or not Donald Trump's going to lose Catholic votes. That's ridiculous at this current stage in American history. But we're discussing it because of the influence of her and Nicole Shanahan. And I desperately hope that priests and people in faith reach out to Trump to correct this idea in his mind about IVF and about abortion in general.
Yeah, if they haven't put it on the website and said it's a policy statement, then it's a one-off, and you don't ever repeat it again, which, we can all hope and pray that it just doesn't get repeated and it doesn't make the policy statements on the websites, and that it just goes into the dustbin of history. Otherwise, if he goes out and promotes this every day, you're right, he's giving votes away.
Yep, and we're in trouble. And what votes do Democrats give away? None. They're not giving anything away.
Nope.
She went far left on everything. I mean, this woman, like you mentioned in the previous test, she could have chosen Shapiro and locked up Pennsylvania, and Trump would have just been, completely unable to even campaign there because Shapiro was licensed there. But she didn't. She chose Tim Walz, who's sort of the defender of every Muslim in America. So who is she really losing in her base?
No one. Now, one final point on this, and we're going to wrap the show up for the week here. Again, a friend of mine, Maggie, and you are correct about Tulsi and Shannon, or Magdalene. These are Jezebel demons of the old Asherah poles that know his weakness. Nicole Shanahan is now that I'm thinking about it, has been just a little too quick to become Trump's right-hand woman.
Yes.
She's out there cutting ads for him.
Yeah, but this is always what happens, Mike. We sit there as principled conservatives and Christians, and suddenly some libertarian is like his right-hand girl or his right-hand man. This has been the problem. This is why he loses things, because he never accepts that the people who are going to be on his side are the people who he might think are a little bit boring or not as fun as him.
That is a great argument. All right. Magdalene, thank you. Magdalene Rose. You can find her on Twitter at Magdalene Rose, and, of course, here on the Crusade Radio Network.